on a scholarship program, and we worked with them a lot. So from what I gathered is that University of Wisconsin Stevens Point is fairly progressive in what they try to do.
Sure, it would be.
Yes, and so he has an activity program set up for going out and snorkeling and kayaking and studying nature that way. And I have this concept for teaching English. So the idea is to take English and teach it in that environment, but also where it's important. I've been teaching, I've had this most non-traditional route into teaching. My first job as a teacher was teaching at a zoo with animals, taking animals around to schools, sometimes to juvenile facilities, to mental health facilities, to almost convalescence homes sometimes.
You were taking the zoo to the students.
Yes.
Just the way he took the university to the students.
Yes. I was the Jack Hanna, and I was really not. I'm not a huge animal person, in sense. So there was always this sort of. It was always a sense of comedy, in a way, with the animals, where it was almost fun, but it was almost as if we were doing an act together. And it wasn't my intention, but I wasn't really necessarily comfortable with animals, and I think they weren't comfortable with me, so it made for some funny moments. But so in that, I learned the idea that I learned the concepts of you have to bring something interesting into the classroom to grab their attention. I understood you have some sense of, you had to know your subject material.
And then you had to know the student.
Humor, but humor was important.
Sure.
And I found humor was very important in that. And I also noticed that there's certain education done right can have a very profound impact on people. And that was important for me. But then I went into traditional education. But the next step that I really had is I moved to Romania in 2000. And I needed a job, and I started an English language school just because I was the only one teaching English in the city. And I know it's real, the only native speaker teaching English in the city. And I know it sounds strange, and I thought it was strange, but I had an immediate monopoly on this market. But once my small business grew to where it was too big for me to do, and I didn't have to teach every day, I got a job offer from an American school to run a tutoring program for them, because international schools there's no way, they don't have the resources, and a lot of times, they have the money, but they don't have the resources to have these tutoring programs for students who are falling behind or for students who have some problems. And since I had done tutoring for English, I fit within that. And they had an opening for a PE teacher. And they asked, and I was a coach I've coached when I was younger and things like this, and they asked me if I wanted to teach PE, and I was like, sure. So I taught PE out of a 22-hour cycle, and it was 7 days. You went 7 days, and then you repeated those 7 days. I taught 8 hours. But it was one of the best learning experiences because I understood I was able to understand what you can teach through guided activities.
You could teach social skills, you could teach language skills.
And to watch how, for instance, none of my students like doing push-ups. And I got tired of encouraging them to do push-ups. So I said, here you go. I said, all right. And I created a chart on the wall. And you had everybody had their name, and you had a thumbtack on it. And the chart had a circle in the middle that said 50. And then you had a circle out of it that said 30, and it kind of progressed. And I said, you guys can do as many push-ups as you want, but please put your name within the right circle where you are in this target. And at first, students started out wanting to do 10, but then those students who started doing 50, the students who want to do 10 want to do 20, want to do 30. So the students themselves naturally migrated to this point of...
They got into the club.
Yeah, and I was to the point where I didn't care.
No, as long as they did some push-ups.
As long as they did some push-ups, I was fine. And if you want to do it, so it was students self-motivating each other. Mm-hmm. And I, as a teacher, just became less and less. And I realized I would design the activities, and the students would do them, but because they were physical activities, these students came away with a sense of pride. Look what I can do physically. Look how hard I can push myself. And
how can we get that in the academic realm?
Through that,
interesting.
Through that, I like history, and we were sitting around. I was sitting around with the history teacher, and when she was talking about they were teaching Roman history, and I was like, cool. So let's get the phalanx, and we'll create these little armies, and we'll have these battles with these, and how you move around and who can move around, and it worked out well. So I realized that you can teach different subjects while you're using physical education. So this is kind of the idea, is a combination of both. You're going to want to have to learn how to snorkel and sea kayak and do these activities. But first you have to learn you have to have the English language to understand the directions, or you're not going to know what to do. So this is my concept idea. And I see students who come through my program here, and they don't learn because we try to teach a subject. We try to teach a musical instrument, which is our vocal cords and our mind. We try to teach a musical instrument like we try to teach history. And it just doesn't work. Out of a textbook, and it just doesn't work. So my concept is to kind of turn that on. There's a lot going. There is people doing what I'm doing, in a sense. But I guess this is why I was interested in you. I'm not taking anything that's new. I'm not inventing anything. I'm just taking things that are already out there, and I'm just I'm tweaking them and putting them together in a way that will produce an outcome that I think will be beneficial for the students and me economically. Which, truthfully, if I can't eat, it doesn't matter how beneficial it is for the students.
Right. No, you got to have some resources.
Yeah. But like you, I mean, you talked about, which I'm interested in, is, even you yourself had to go out and market the program, or find people to market it.
Well, there were some personalities. My colleagues at Berkeley thought I was crazy.
Sure.
They actually did. Nobody leaves a university like Berkeley or Harvard to come to a field. Nobody
it was
does
an airfield.
Nobody does. And even after I convinced one or two to come down and see me and talk with me, when they left, they were reinforced that I was out of my mind. I mean, I changed the whole complexion one day when I was talking to a physicist at Berkeley, a young guy, and his name is Karplus, died recently, and he couldn't understand that I gave up all that at Berkeley to come here. And he wouldn't do that. But indirectly, he did it himself when he was at Berkeley. He's the one who started a physics program for high school kids while he was a full professor at Berkeley. Because he didn't like freshman physics students coming knowing what they didn't know.
Right.
So he solved the problem by...
But he wouldn't come here.
Right.
He wouldn't go that far. And I said to myself, we were going to be the MIT of the South, because I was a biochemist.
And you believed this at the time you came here?
When I came, I didn't have all the information I should have had. But I thought it would be an interesting challenge. I really did.
Okay.
And Berkeley wasn't any challenge anymore, and Harvard wasn't a challenge for me anymore. I did it. It was fine. I made a full professor, got my salary, looked around for things to do, found things to do, but it wasn't really what I was tasting.
Right.
This was a real challenge to build the capstone to the park with a technology background. I mean, that was exciting. So I talked to my wife. I was going to Chile back and forth for the Ford Foundation, and she was in Berkeley, and I had her meet me here, and she finally said, well, if this is what you want to do, I'll come. I only had 3 kids, so I did it, and I'm not sorry. There were days in the early years when I was wondering whether I really was out of my head. But it took a while to create an infrastructure that enabled me to create distance education. But that's not what the trustees wanted.
Yeah.
They really were trying to support the MIT of the South.
They wanted a physical location.
And I kept saying to them, you're not going to get that, and I can't give you that, so if that's what you want, I'll leave. Because we already had a $4 million debt and no students.
When did it switch over? When they started seeing the numbers?
When I took over the presidency in 1969.
And that was the point where they said, okay, we trust your vision.
Well, what they said was, okay, build us what you can, because you're telling us you can't build me the MIT of the South. I said, no way. I can't get the kind of level of people I need to build MIT. They're not going to come here for sand.
So you need more than money to lure these people, is what you're basically saying.
There has to be an environment which they will find exciting.
Right.
And if you're in the sciences, coming down to pebbles on a sand is not exciting unless you're interested in that particular area. So, I mean, I knew these people. I mean, I had worked with them through PSSC physics and biology and all, so, I mean, I knew them. I wasn't a stranger to them. But they wouldn't come.
But who came up with this concept of MIT of the South?
Five citizens locally found out that the government was going to sell this airfield. When the government got it as a landing field in World War II.
Now, when you say this one, you say
this field
that we're sitting on now,
right now, and across the street.
Over at University Drive.
Yeah, across the street.
No, you're talking about where the Nova College is now.
Right.
Okay.
All that was, that was owned by the people who gave it to the government so that they would have a touch field to practice before they went out on carriers, mainly the Navy.
Okay.
And now they were going to sell it. So they said, no, we gave it to you. So the deal was made with the political group and the 5 citizens here, 2 happen to be brothers, that if you come up with some good reason, we'll give you back the land, but you have to have a good public interest reason. So they came up with a womb-to-tomb educational park. And the purpose of the park would be to invent, implement, evaluate, and disseminate new educational practices. So they started that in 62, and by the time I came to visit in 64, just to visit on my way to South America, the high school, junior, senior high school was built and functioning, and it was exciting because it was invented, the laptops, lap modules, and they were already working on self-paced learning in grades 7 through 12.
In 64?
In 64, 65. And they were then building an elementary school to attach to grades 7 through 12. And I thought that was interesting. And what's more, it was going to give me a laboratory. So I would have a laboratory right across the street.
But you had been working in teaching sciences before then. But
yeah.
you weren't an administrator as sense. This was just maybe a hobby that you...
No. I came to continue teaching science.
Okay.
Because we already had oceanography here when I came, and we had the Growth Institute of Physics already here. They were here before I was hired as a dean of graduate studies.
Okay.
So, and they wanted me to have science education. And the scientists were here. So all I had to do was build a little around me, cognitive psychologist and a good researcher, etc., and I would have PhDs in science education.